Welcome, welcome, welcome to a wonderful, wonderful show. Now, come on, Mr. Simmer down. We've all seen the new frock. And you, sir. Try and pretend you're not drunk, okie dokie. Now, come on, I want you to welcome on stage now, Rachel Ashley's Your Turn.
Ladies and gentlemen, this week it's Gareth Kearns, an actor, a musician, a writer, a very well-known campaigner who's come all the way from South Wales and who we see very regularly on our televisions. Gareth, hiya, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. I do want to say just one thing straight away, though. Steve regularly has to come up from Wales. I now live in London.
Right.
So I have initially come all the way from Wales, yes, but I'm based here now. But Steve, when we're doing this, what we do now, he's actually coming up from Wales to do it.
Oh,
So,
is he really? My word.
yeah.
Okay. Wow. I mean, my what's the word? My respect and my awe of you guys is actually you just keep on going, and I don't honestly know how you do it. For people listening who aren't familiar with SODEM, SODEM are the people who rock up on your television news behind politicians being interviewed. They're the guys with the signs that stand on camera in shot, and so you know exactly who they are. They're the Stop Brexit people. And so how are you finding fame, Gareth?
I don't know about fame. I mean, Steve is the touch point. So whenever anybody wants to make reference, it's because Steve is the guy who stood, and he's the one who wears the blue hat.
Yeah.
And at best, my reference is I'm the one with the hair. So,
Yes, and the voice. You're the one with the voice.
yes, yes. I'm the loud voice, it's always Steve. He always gets the credit of shouting "Stop Brexit" and everything with his megaphone because he always did.
Yeah.
I came around a little later, but
Mm.
actually, you can go back a few years. There's been a few times when there's sort of like someone on the news going, "It's that Steve Bray shouting again." It wasn't.
No, it was you,
Sometimes it
Gareth.
was.
Yes.
Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was. But sometimes it wasn't.
It doesn't, I mean, I love Steve, but he doesn't quite have your dulcet tones, does he? So, let's go back, rewind all the way to the beginning. You're from South Wales, from Pembrokeshire, which is a spectacularly beautiful part of the world. And tell us a little bit about who you are and your background and how did you get from there to standing in Westminster shouting at people? What a route! How does that happen? So let's go
Well,
back to South Wales, and you're at school. Where are you? Where are
Yes.
you at school, and what are you doing?
I went Milford Haven Central Secondary Modern School.
Okay.
Um, it was one of the last places in the country. There were a handful of others, but it had the great turn to comprehensive schools. So there were only a handful of maybe a dozen places around the country, I think, that still had a secondary modern school and a grammar school. And I went to the secondary modern school. I would later go to the grammar school because you
Yeah.
couldn't do A levels at the secondary modern. So I
Right.
did my O levels because I'm old enough to have done O levels, and
Me
then
too, Gareth. Me
went to the
too.
grammar school as well, yeah. And then went to the grammar school to do my A levels, and would then go to Carmarthen to the art college.
Okay.
But in the end, I mean, I could draw, I could paint, but I was always a bit sort of more bookish. So I ended up going to Goldsmiths, where I did joint honours English and history of art.
Right.
Um, so that was the education sort of thing. Um, but I mean, the thing is that there was this rumor, and
Mhm.
I don't know, it's more than that. There was something said by a teacher to my mum that you should challenge that because he's passed his 11 plus.
Oh.
Um, and the idea was at the time, it's around about 1980,
Mm.
that uh, they were getting ready for comprehensive, even in that area.
Mm.
Comprehensive had happened around most of the country.
Yeah.
And it was the idea that rather than being tied to the 11 plus, a headmaster could intervene in order to send a child where they would be best suited. It was just decided I'd be best going to the secondary modern school because my father was
That's
a
outrageous.
practical Well, my father was a practical guy. He was a pipe fitter, which is there was a sort of engineering thing. But he had some qualifications. He definitely got on with the world, and he was in the oil industry.
Hmm.
But I was basically sent to do woodwork and metalwork. And my I'm so proud of this. My third year woodwork report said
Hmm.
biggest poser in the class. That
Excellent.
entire year, I made one table leg. That was my entire woodwork output. I had absolutely no interest whatsoever. Put me in the English class, put me in the history class, put me in the physics class. Great. I was, top of all
Yeah.
those classes. Fine. Stick me in the woodwork class, and it took me a year to make one table leg. I just didn't care.
And yet they sent you to the secondary modern rather than the grammar, despite you passing your 11 plus. That's outrageous. That is an injustice. And that I've heard this story
It's not.
before.
No, 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 it's not. I am very happy about how things panned out
Oh,
because
okay.
ultimately I would go and get an education and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But I have had people scream in my face that I take the position I do on Brexit
Mm.
because I'm what they describe as metropolitan elite.
Right. Okay.
Now, number one, I live in a metropolis now, but I grew up as a country boy in darkest West Wales.
Yes.
Uh, Number two, elite. If I'm your definition of elite, the people who are screaming metropolitan and elite at me have been told that I'm the elite by public school boys.
Yeah. You see,
The elite.
this is one of the main reasons I wanted to do this particular batch of podcasts, because I'm aware of the background of some of the people who are running this Rejoin campaign, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so from the horse's mouth, you are not metropolitan elite by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, you're just not, and neither
No,
is Peter Core.
no,
So
absolutely not.
let's carry on setting the record straight. I think it's really important to do that, and the fact that I mean, for younger people listening, they may not be aware of how the education system worked back then.
Mm.
That you were funneled at the age of 11 for the rest of your life, unless you had the kind of personality that broke out of that. Or you had a particular member of staff in your school who saw something in you and intervened. But it meant that people were funneled into pathways for their lives at the age of 11, which doesn't really it happens now, but it wasn't as formal. It's not as formalised as it was then. Back then, it was 11, and that was that. The choice was made for you, and that was the end. But Gareth being Gareth, you weren't having any of that.
Oh, well, sort of, yes, but at the same time, you touched upon something there.
Right.
And yet you said something like, unless there was a particular member of staff.
Mm.
Now, there were teachers in my secondary modern school, and they were at the tail end of their career because there was a particular guy, Walter Ireland, who had been in the Air Force during the war. And I mean, it's like everyone had been in the war if they were of that generation, of course.
Mm.
But they'd come out of it with some severe convictions about how you can impact upon the world. And I wasn't the only one. You could see them taking a particular interest in certain boys or girls and saying, yeah, I'm going to pay you a bit more attention because you can do something with this. So he was my English teacher.
Okay.
And there was another guy who was my maths teacher. Now, I never had the same facility with maths, but I could get by. And I did actually pass my maths O level 6 months early,
Oh, okay.
just. But
Impressive.
the thing is, I was, but it's like I breezed through English and all that sort of thing. But I
Mm.
had to struggle with maths, but I got it.
Mm.
And these teachers, that teacher was Mr. Elliott. These teachers, he actually was a little younger. He hadn't gone through the war,
Mm.
but nevertheless, he was. These guys, it's the 50s and 60s, and there was this real, we can impact on the world, we can change it, and that
Yes.
generation has now died off. As I said, Walter Island would have retired from teaching about, I think, a year after I left. I mean, he really was at the end of his career. And I've got friends, contemporaries who are teachers. I'm not doing down teachers now, but I don't often see in the more recent generations of teachers that fire You could have a teacher with actual fire.
Absolutely.
It, it was a real. They'd stand up and they it energize you, and I just don't see it anymore. And I think it is, but I do think, and this is the unfortunate thing about it, I do think it's about having gone through a war. It really made them think about
The bigger
what you
picture.
could do. And of course, it's one thing to say that was great. We don't have that anymore. Well, we can go through a war, and that's a good thing. So um,
Mm.
people's fire comes from somewhere. There must be something that makes them choose to stand. I mean, I'm the interesting thing about Steve is I still haven't myself got what it is that made him stand. Because remember, I turn up a year later. He's the guy who initially stands and things coalesce around him.
Yes.
And I'm part of that coalescence. I'm not that figure that could have done that. And I don't have any delusions on that point. Something about that guy, made him stand when he was a lone voice, and he was a lone voice. He would become joined by lots of people, but to start off, he's a lone voice.
Mm. That
And
requires real courage, doesn't it?
yes, absolutely. And where does that come from? I mean, I didn't do that. I've watched him, and he's had a lot of support, but you need a lot of support to do this.
Yeah.
None of that takes away from the fact that initially he was just this git who stood up and did it.
Yeah. And hopefully I'll get him on to do one of these podcasts because, again, he's an incredibly interesting character and there's an awful lot of, well, just pure shite spoken about him that I know isn't true. And it would be wonderful for him to have a platform to put the record straight a little bit. But for now, it's about you.
Mm.
Yeah. So you did your O levels, and then secondary modern schools didn't offer A levels. The school I went to didn't, and if you wanted to do A levels, you had to go to
the grammar school.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you did that.
Mm.
And how did you find?
They actually would come together. So I'm in the grammar school for a year, and then the second year, the two schools come together because they finally did become comprehensive.
Okay.
So I'm one of a handful of kids in Milford Haven who went through all three iterations of the school.
Oh wow, that's worthy of a dissertation all by itself, isn't it?
Oh, the culture shock of going from secondary modern to grammar,
I
really was a
know.
culture shock.
Yes, absolutely. That happened to me. And so I can completely relate to what you're saying there. And a lot of kids just can't cope with the change. The change is profound. But you stuck with it and you passed your A levels and you went to university and you followed the humanities arts path, which was always going to be you, I think, was it?
Yes, I think I did, and I enjoyed physics, but it was made very clear to me that to pursue physics beyond a certain point, you had to do an awful lot of maths.
Yeah.
And I could do the maths, but it wasn't fun, and I struggled. And I got my O level, it's fine, but I don't want to do this anymore.
Yes. Yeah. And so so you went to university. Where did you go to university?
Goldsmiths.
Which is in London. And again, that must have been a profound culture shock.
Yes, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to tell you a story now. This is a true story. This is a story I've told a few times. So you go to university, and the classic thing is there's Freshers' Week, and you have all these different groups that everyone wants you to join, and they can be quite fun things, they can be quite serious things. And there was a philosophy one, which I went along to, but there was also a communist group. Now, I didn't really have any great communist convictions, but I actually joined a few different things, thinking, I can always just walk away if I think it's all utter rubbish, but I just get a feel for this because, you certainly, then Goldsmiths was renowned as being quite a left-wing college and stuff like that. All the London ones were really. So I do that, and as is the way with these things, you have the meetings, someone talks to you, and then it's all round to someone's house for beer and everything because you're students, right?
Yeah.
So student party, great, was one of those great ones where there was like a dozen students had taken over this great big tall house in New Cross, those old Victorian houses that got like 6 floors and everything, and it's great. It's like and I'm sitting there thinking, oh, it's going to be like the young ones, and it wasn't. It was it wasn't nasty at all. Everyone was perfectly lovely and polite and very very middle class. I was getting that impression very very quickly, and that wasn't any sort of issue until I'm sort of I'm a first year fresher now, and I'm sat between these two guys who were big in the Goldsmiths Communist Group, and they were both second years. One of them might have been, anyway, later years, second or third years. And they start explaining to me what the working classes needed.
Ah. Right, yes.
And one of them, his father, was a doctor, and the other one, his father, was a lawyer, and my father was a pipe fitter. And I was being educated by these nice middle-class boys. They were lovely middle-class boys, but about what the working classes needed.
Wow.
And it immediately turned me off the communist group. It immediately turned me off. It was the start of my thing whereby I've said for decades now, I do not have any ideology. Ideology is what people do when they want to stop thinking about things.
Yeah, it's lazy, isn't it?
Yeah. It gives you a little program, and you just sort of like go along with it and say, right, I do this because A, B, C, D. If I follow those rules, everything will be fine. It'll lead to utopia. It doesn't matter which ideology. You can be talking the common or garden ideology of religion. You can be talking communism, fascism. Any ideology does that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just immediately came away from that and that was the start of my thinking. Ideology is nonsense, and I do not want to be lectured about, the place I come from, the people I know, what we need by people who
are
clueless,
but clueless.
But clueless,
yeah.
But mean so well. I'm not being nasty to them. Meant well, but we're wrong.
Yes. And the other thing about ideology is that human beings are just not that simple ever. People. Yes. You can. That's why no ideology will ever work, because some character will come along and not tick all of the boxes and do something unexpected. And hallelujah for that.
Yes. No, actually, hallelujah for that. That's exactly what should be celebrated, because that is what makes the great mad fair that is living worthwhile.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, what did you actually study at Goldsmiths?
Joint honours, English and history of art, and I probably leant towards the English more than the history of art. But yeah.
Right. Okay. And I believe you did some law there as well, did you?
No, not there. Later on, I would do a law conversion course, because you can. A lot of lawyers don't actually study law. They'll take a degree in whatever, and then you can do an intensive conversion course into law, and then you can start looking at becoming a solicitor or a barrister.
Yeah.
Now, I started doing that, and then I dropped out. But what I have always thanked, I don't know what for, is that the first thing we did was constitutional law. And that module of constitutional law, I A, found fascinating, but B, has probably done me more good than my entire degree.
Oh, wow.
In terms of how I've been able to apply it.
Yeah.
Since the whole thing blew up with Leave, Remain, and all that jazz.
Yeah.
Because I have so many times been able to just argue very simple things. I'm editing at the moment some video from when the SODEM protest coincided with the farmers' protest.
All right.
And this was in December. They happened at the same time.
Yeah.
And it was very telling. I'll put up a video about this at some point, which people can watch. But it was very telling that, yes, there were farmers sincerely protesting about that situation.
Yeah.
And then there were an awful lot of hangers-on with other agendas.
As always.
As always. But this guy, he's got his camera phone on a stick pointing at me. And he's sort of like, they've come over, a group of them come over, he's come over and he's sort of, you're against democracy because you're doing this. We've had a vote. And it's like, hold on. What do you mean? And well, you're against democracy because we had a vote and this is ended. Why is it ended? Have you stopped democracy? No, I haven't stopped democracy. Right then. So we can continue to make our campaign. Well, yes, you can continue to make your campaign. Well, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then he said, yes, but where is the sovereignty of this country? And I said, I'm so glad you asked that.
Yeah.
Remember, this is on Parliament Square.
Wow.
Where do you think the sovereignty of this country is? It's in the people. Is it? Is it? The sovereignty as vested comes from initially, of course, the sovereign. The clue's in the word. The king, the queen. Now, of course, we had the revolution in 1688, and it then got transferred to Parliament.
Yeah.
And that's where sovereignty is in this country. And of course, that takes you right back to when we had to have Gina Miller kick up just to make sure that Parliament didn't merely rubber stamp something more or less set up by the executive just to get this over and done with.
Yeah.
But, Parliament is sovereign in this country.
Yeah. And always,
that's
and
a
always
fundamental.
was. Yeah.
And always, well, since 1688 was,
Yes.
certainly.
Yeah.
And that is a fundamental of our law, our constitution, and almost no one in this country understands this.
Well, no, because
we don't
it's not
teach
taught.
civics.
Yeah. Oh,
we
gosh.
don't teach civics.
That is so important. If only we were taught civics. And I suspect it's a political choice not to. Which I may be wrong. That may be like reaching for the aluminium foil there, but there it is. It's so important. People have no idea how this country is run. None. And it breaks my heart. And we, as the people of this country, deserve a whole lot better. So you've done this. You've done your degree. You've done some of a conversion course, which was really, really handy. And you end up being an actor and a musician.
Mm-hmm. Well, a musician first and later an actor, yeah.
What happened? Did you just join a band?
Yes, I was at a university and I joined a band.
Oh,
yes.
Fantastic.
That's just what you do.
Yeah.
Remember, you have to bear in mind that the university we're talking about here, if I'd been there 2 years earlier, I could have joined Blur. That's where half of Blur were.
Right, okay.
So, but yeah, no, there was a scene. I mean, one of the things I did do early on was I played in a Queen tribute band.
Okay.
Which was great fun.
Yeah. So you were John Deacon, were you?
I was John Deacon on the guitar, but I was actually Roger Taylor on the voice.
Oh, okay.
You put it because I could do the falsetto. You see.
Yeah.
So, and of course you mix it all up. No one can tell that's what you're doing. So that was great fun. Well, one's a little stray little fact. Ricky Gervais was our manager briefly.
No, really? Ooh.
Yeah.
How? Well, now he drops the celebrity names in. I didn't know that. I'll have to pick your brains about that a little bit more. But you also started working as an actor at Shakespearean Darling.
Yeah, well, that was a little bit later because what had happened, I did do a little bit of bits and bobs of acting at that time, but it was more the case of, it wasn't really, it was just a case of I was a performer and people would sort of like throw you a bone here and there. So that's all that really was. But doing things a bit more sort of seriously was came about later on because I more or less, I was in my early 30s. And I'd had a few sort of tickles with things, the bands that might have happened, but they didn't. Yeah. And I just decided, you can definitely, you can be in a rock band when you're 70 like Mick Jagger, but you break when you're in your 20s, Yeah. So I just thought, right, no, that's fine.
And so, and then, see, I want to know where your voice came from because it's fabulous.
I don't know. Because
you must have picked stuff up when you were doing the Shakespeare because you were surrounded by people who presumably were all trained as well.
I got voice training. Around the early 30s, I started getting actor training and stuff like that. So that happened then. But actually, the accent and all that sort of thing. I can remember when I was still at school, and there were these two guys who had actually been in primary school with me.
Mm.
We went back that far, so they knew better. They knew the entire family, and they won them one day. Said, "Oh, you must be happy. Why? England won the rugby." And it's like, what? Why would I be happy? Because you? Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, sorry. Um, because he just zoned out of the fact that I don't sounded that Welsh.
Right.
And he'd just for a second had this strange moment. Well, this is both Jamie and Julian. Had the strange moment of they were the Welsh supporters, and I was the English supporter. Oh no, of course he isn't. But it was there because I never quite had the Pembrokeshire accent.
Right. I wonder
Don't know why.
why. Just one of those weird things.
I think the nearest I can come to an explanation is to blame John Pertwee and Tom Baker.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, Tom Baker, what a voice. Yes, I mean, yeah, absolutely. There are far worse role
Because
models.
they both impressed me massively when I was
Yeah.
a small wee child. So that's, I mean, not be that, but it's the only thing I can possibly come up with.
So we get to 2016 and we have to have this vote. And so you've gone from actor, musician, thinker, and all of a sudden we're faced with this ludicrous choice. And where are you then? And presumably, because I like speaking to Peter, he was a Corbynite, which absolutely blew my mind. I mean, did you know that you were a Remainer, kind of deep down in the heart of you?
When that's initially getting mooted, when Cameron announces that there's going to be a referendum on the matter, I was definitely, in a gentle way, inclined to remain position.
Right.
But I thought, okay, well, let's look into this because, I could be wrong, but now, it wasn't something we were ever going to make a decision about. Oh, no, we do actually know. So, okay, I'll have to actually understand this. I could have been getting this wrong all along. Let's have a look at it. I had a look at it, and I still came down on the Remain side. But the thing that really, really made me think, no, I'm definitely going Remain on this one, was almost that the choice in and of itself in a perfect world was less important compared to this such obvious duplicity and mendacity and shenanigans of the people who were pushing to leave.
Right.
It was so nakedly dishonest.
Right.
That it's like, hold on, if there was any hope of there being something good, something positive, something real and genuinely beneficial to our country from taking this a line, you wouldn't have to do all this nonsense.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
So
Okay.
that's what absolutely convicted me into a hardened position of no, let's Remain. But then, of course, I'm appalled by the patrician complacency of the Remain campaign, which you remember, it's Cameron and Osborne for the government, and okay, they're Tories, they're going to be patrician, of course they are, but the complacency that was with it as well, and then they would
complacency is the word, and it was smug as well, actually, wasn't it?
Yes,
and
we were just expected to go along with them because they were the splendid chaps, and you should do what you're told, boys and girls.
Exactly.
And it's like, you take that attitude, and what's going to happen? I'll tell you what's going to happen. Exactly what did.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, it was only a few 100,000, wasn't it? Ultimately, that swung it, and to piss off so few people, and then to peddle populism at the same time, it was hardly a surprise. So on the Friday, you woke up, and how did you feel?
Well, hold on, no, because the actual vote came through on the Thursday night, didn't it?
It did, yes.
I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it was.
You stayed up for it then.
Yeah. In fact, I stayed. I was here where I am now. I'm at a friend's place right now, and we decided to sit up and watch that. And Andy's Scottish, so we had some fine whiskies, and we were going to do that. And then we just ended up hitting them a bit because it was like, oh goodness Lord, what a ridiculous, stupid. The hassles we have just made for ourselves, and I would stress this. At that point, I'm thinking of the hassles and problems that we're going to have caused ourselves with this, and I had no idea it was so much worse than I thought it was going to be.
Right. Yeah.
When you started looking into what this would actually mean,
yeah.
I had to slightly modify that because there were different models as to what leaving would actually mean.
Mm.
The model that we took was amongst the worst possible options.
Yeah. Mm.
There would have been other models. I mean, they talked about the Norway sort of model, didn't they?
They did, and EFTA,
And
yeah.
And those would have been unfortunate,
but not as devastating as this.
But not as devastating, exactly. So at the moment that all of this kicks off, I don't really have a good conviction of how bad this is going to be.
So what gets you, Gareth, what gets you on the streets? What is the thing that makes you think, up with this I cannot put, I need to stand and shout at people in Westminster? What was the trigger for that?
The trigger for me to actually first get there is, do you remember Theresa May was going on after Gina Miller had forced her hand, is going on about things like the meaningful vote. Do you remember that?
Yes,
in
I do.
December
Yeah.
2018.
Yeah.
So that's the first time I turn up in Westminster and meet SODEM.
Yeah.
Because the shenanigans around that, as I said, I understand just that simple little fact of where sovereignty is vested. So the idea that someone's got to take you to court to get you to use Parliament to do the single biggest constitutional change that we have faced in how many generations?
It was an outrage. It was an outrage.
And I still think that actually most people do not get the degree of that outrage.
No, I don't. I think you're right. I do think you're
in
right.
America, for all America's faults, it could never, ever have happened. In America, because they've got their codified constitution, an idea like that would never get off the ground because we have an uncodified constitution. In order for we saw this prorogation as well, in order for the courts to take any view on it, a case must be brought to them. Otherwise, the courts, who might be fully aware of what's going on now, is unconstitutional. They can't do anything.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Which is terrifying, really, because you're banking on people being a reasonable chap, and if somebody comes along who is not particularly reasonable, you're fucked, basically.
Yes, which is what happened,
for want of a better word. And so here we are, and so you're now very active with SODEM every single Wednesday, and you use all of your background, you use your legal knowledge, you use your wonderful voice. You use your music to produce campaign materials. Now, where can everybody find out about what SODEM is, what they're doing, and whether they can join in or not? What's the best place to find you?
There isn't a separate. I mean, the Steve's Twitter, which he still uses because people know it. We've got Blue Sky and everything now as well, but still people use Twitter.
So all the social platforms.
Yes, but the thing is, what we keep saying, we keep reiterating as much as possible. If Parliament is sitting on a Wednesday, there will be a SODEM presence there,
and people can just rock up and join in.
And just rock up and join us for an hour. Yeah, you know, me and Steve will be there from quite early doors because we try to get behind the things like that. But if you think in terms of being there from 10 till 5, anything in that window that you can be there for is welcome.
Now then, you've sent me 3 tracks of yours, and I'm damned if I can choose between them.
Well, one of them isn't mine. One of them is just us singing along to Andre Rieu. So,
yes, fair enough. That's Beethoven, isn't it? So I don't know which one, but Gareth, thank you so much. And could you please introduce? Do a general introduction for a piece of music that you have created. Do you know the one? I think I'm going to do the one, the kind of more ballady one, the folky ballady one.
Okay, yeah.
What was that one called? I can't remember now.
I can't remember myself.
Whatever it's called, here it is by Gareth.
Sunlit Uplands, I think.
Yes,
Sunlit
that's
Uplands.
right.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Sunlit Uplands by Gareth Kearns. Gareth, thank you so much. That's been absolutely brilliant. We could have gone on and on and on and on and on. But people can find you outside Westminster on a Wednesday and various other events throughout the year, including, of course, the big Rejoin March in September. Gareth,
And the
thank
party
you.
conferences as well.
Of course, yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
No, thank you. Cool.
The sunlit uplands of a new golden age were beckoning for us all. So we threw off our shackles and we greeted the day, a free people standing tall. But now I got no money and it ain't so sunny, so I paused to take a look all around. And the guys who led the charge can't be seen, it seems they've gone to ground. So what was supposed to be easy is now suddenly hard, and the coming days seem quite bleak. It seems we were lied to at industrial scales, you wonder they had the cheek. But then the posh guy in the suit was keen to reassure me, keen to allay all my fears. He said that everything would all be fine in about 50 years. Is it all too late? Are we now just stuck with the mess that they made? Is it all too late? Are we now just stuck with the mess that they made? Is it all flooding out the country hand over fist? Doctors, nurses moving away. Is it I was promised money for the NHS, but we're bleeding tens of millions a day. I can't help wondering as the big day draws near, does everyone feel the same? I mean, we know what they told us isn't what we will get. It appears there'll be rather more pain, and in matters of the national good, I'm inclined yet to lean towards the circumspect, and not have the whole bloody country completely wrecked. Is it all too late? Are we now just stuck with the mess that they made? Is it all too late? Are we now just stuck with the mess that they made? Is it all the days of milk and honey were ahead of us, but now we're stockpiling food. We're gonna be free to make our laws for ourselves, but now we'll take America's rules. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. And all the objections that democracy's threatened